First Commonwealth Bank. It's WCCS at AM 1160 and FM 101.1. County Commissioner Mike Baker, he is with us this morning. Rod is not going to be able to make it today. However, Rod Ruddick, of course, other county commissioner. Sherene Hess is expected to join us if she can fight her way through traffic. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
You're carrying the water today.
That's okay. No problem. I know that I just communicated with Sherene, and she said that she was caught behind a couple of buses, but she's on her way in. So, and Rod is out at a meeting at the intermediate unit this morning. Every once in a while, we have to split up to try to cover things, and so he's taking care of a meeting out there this morning.
So what's on your mind as a county commissioner today?
A couple things. One of these is budget time.
Yeah.
This is budget preparation time for the county for 2018, and we're working very hard with our elected officials and our department heads to keep our pencils good and sharp this year, and they're putting their budget worksheets together, and commissioners, the three of us will be meeting individually with every elected official and every department head, and that's going to start about October the 30th, and we will be putting our budget on public view on November the 29th, and then we'll be taking final action on it on December the 20th. And I see that my colleague Sherene Hess has just come in the door.
Ta-da, there she is.
Good morning.
Got stuck behind the buses.
Yeah, we hear. So the budget is one thing.
The budget is one thing, and let me make a small announcement here about how some of that's going to happen, because as you know, the Commissioners' regular public meetings are on the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. But in November, because of the CCAP conference, we've had to make some changes, and so that's going to affect the way that we put our budget on public view. So we're going to be putting it out there at our public meeting on the 29th, I believe it is, of November.
29th of November?
Yes, because we're changing our meetings to
29th.
The 29th, yes. We'll be putting it out there, and then we'll be taking final action on the budget in December.
So normally you would be meeting 8th and 22nd.
That's correct.
Next month it'll be 8th and 29th?
It'll be 15th and 29th.
15th and 29th.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's because of some other commitments that we have in Harrisburg and with the CCAP conference and so on. And only one other thing I wanted to talk about, and since Sherene often gets shortchanged on time here, I'm going to kick the rest of it over to her. But let me just mention, and I'm sure she's going to want to talk about this too, but I just want to remind people that 3 weeks from today, we have a general election coming up here. And we have a number of county races, including judge of Court of Common Pleas and register and recorder and treasurer. For the first time in many years, we'll be having a new treasurer.
That's
in
right.
Indiana County.
Yeah.
And Sandy Kirkland is retiring, and she's done a fantastic job over the years. And
After 28 years?
yeah. Hate to see her go, but there will be someone else in that seat. So one other thing I want to say to folks, that when you go to vote this year, I would suggest that you do a little bit of homework before you go. There are 3 pages to vote this year. There's a front and a back, and then another sheet. And there's a referendum question on there. There's a lot of judgeships, Supreme Court retentions. There's an all-out Supreme Court election. There's Superior Court. There's Commonwealth Court. One of the things that you should do is go out to the Indiana County website, to the county's website, and up in the top right corner you can click and you can see a sample ballot. And what I would suggest people do is bring that ballot up and look at those names, and then Google a little bit to find out a little bit about them, because I think so often people go into the voting booth and they're kind of blindsided because they don't know that much about those judgeships and those particular races. So do a little bit of homework before you go, and I think that it'll benefit you.
It's good advice for any election.
Absolutely.
Certainly for this one. Sherene Hess has a long history with elections, and certainly I'm sure you would concur with that. It's good to know what the candidate for whom you are voting actually stands for.
Yeah, and each candidate has their own website, but also the Pennsylvania League of Women Voters will have a candidate's guide for the state-related races. Locally, I'm not sure if we have a candidate's guide right now, but that may be out there as well. Anyway, if you Google League of Women Voters, that they often have a nonpartisan guide where they ask a couple of different questions.
All right.
So those things do exist. But I agree with Commissioner Baker that it would be very helpful for anyone who's going to vote to look and see what the ballot will look like. Because often you get into the polls and, even if you're a veteran voter, sometimes those things they can have a lot of language and a lot of things on there that aren't necessarily familiar. So it's just like anything. The more prepared you are, the better experience it will be.
And people can see the plain language. If they go online, oftentimes referendum and ballot questions are cryptically written, and it's difficult to understand. But there are places that you can go and Google those questions and have an opportunity to kind of read it in layman's language. That's a little bit easier to understand, maybe.
Could we get the county commissioners to do something about all the big trucks that seem to think that they need to use downtown Indiana? Because there's one hung up here in the corner right now.
Yeah.
See that? Wow.
People back up. This happens all the time. We've got a bypass. I don't know why they're not bypassing the town, but
somehow they missed it.
Yeah.
They usually go by whenever we're having some kind of a ceremony in front of the courthouse.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, Commissioner Hess, let's continue discussing with you some of the issues that the county is dealing with and that you personally are dealing with as a county commissioner.
Yes, I returned from Harrisburg yesterday where I was at a meeting for human services professionals about the Pennsylvania's block grant for the Human Services Development Fund. And Indiana County is in what we call a joinder with Armstrong County, and we're considering going to this block grant arrangement, which does allow for a lot more flexibility with the funding between the different agencies that use that funding, which would be our Human Services and our Drug and Alcohol Commission and our Behavioral Development Health Program, all those programs associated with that. So it was an interesting meeting, and there seems to be very few downsides to it. So we're talking about that. We do want to be we want to put the full analysis and do due diligence for that, but so that's something we're working on. And people don't think about human services so much until they actually need those services. So then they're the folks you want the most to be talking to. But I just want to give a shout out to all the folks who do work on those programs, Tammy Calderon and Cammie Anderson and Lisa Spencer and all of the staff who do such really wonderful work with very few resources for our most vulnerable in our county.
Absolutely. They certainly do. And they, just as you are waiting for the final budget package in Harrisburg. It's kind of hard to put together your own local budget when you don't know what's going to come down the pipe from the other end of the state.
That's right. You don't know kind of what's going to be flowing into the county or when that may take place. I'm confident that we're going to get the budget done. I don't know what that timeline is going to look like.
It's some amount of anxiety for all of us. We're starting to get used to it and normalize it, which is not a good thing.
You're right.
So we really need to resist that. But it is the truth. You have to deal with what you have to deal with.
When you talk about funding, and this came up from a listener who called very irate a couple of weeks ago, there was some sort of program announced that had some state funding attached to it. And was very angry that in these budgetary times, we're spending money on what this caller considered to be something frivolous. And I tried to explain, but he wasn't about to accept my explanation, that the state does collect fees for certain activities, and then those fees have to be dedicated to the purpose for which they were intended. In this case, it was a recreational thing, that the fees that paid for this particular thing were fees collected from fishermen and fishing licenses and special licenses and things of that nature, and boating licenses as well. I think people don't understand that everything doesn't get thrown into one great big pot and then people start reaching in and pulling out money.
It's often by statute that these monies come in as well. So it's not, one person or one group can't just arbitrarily say we're going to transfer that money to this subjective. There's
we've had
a legislation
lot of that happen over the years with what things were supposed to be in certain trusts and so on in government that have been kind of pilfered through. But the fact of the matter is that you're exactly right, Todd, that those monies are collected and they are set aside for certain programs and certain activities, and that's where those monies have to stay. And the other thing that you got to remember, and I totally understand if a person believes that something recreational may be frivolous, but what's frivolous to one person is very important to someone else.
Yes, often those programs really represent economic development for our small towns and rural areas. So it's all part of a big web in a lot of ways.
In this particular case, that was exactly that. It was the new boat launch down in Blairsville. There were 2 new boat launches put in. Well, those pull people into the county and into Blairsville specifically.
Absolutely.
And you know, those are the kinds of attractions that are going to generate income for Indiana County and eventually for everybody within.
Well, one business owner spoke specifically about expanding her business as a direct result of that. And by the way, there was no public funds for that. Those were privately raised funds for that boat launch.
Yeah.
I mean, often there are different programs that support those things anyway, but that particular thing was privately funded.
And that was
through
one
the
of
Western
that was
Pennsylvania
one of the things
Conservancy.
that Linda Gwynn, who was one of the drivers on that program, had to make sure that she had drilled home to people. I mean, she even had a sign down there, you know, explaining to folks that this was not funded with tax dollars. And so, I mean, oftentimes it's hard to get that message across, but I think that it's a good thing. You know, I grew up in Blairsville, and I can remember when that water down there wasn't fit to go near. And now we've got people kayaking on it and everything else. The water's turned from orange to some color that it's supposed to be now.
Yeah.
And it's so much better.
Yeah.
I grew up just down the river from you then.
Yes.
Or up, I guess I was up the river
You were up
from
the creek.
And still am.
Todd, can I make a little plug for
You can.
a seminar we're holding tomorrow night, a panel on women's health and aimed at specifically at rural areas. It's at Breesedale. The public is invited. We've got a great bunch of panelists to talk about how health outcomes are suffering for women in rural areas and what we can do about it.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Breesedale, by the way, is at IUP.
It is. It's 880 School Street is the actual address, and there's parking. It starts at 5:30.
All right.
5:30 to 7:30.
And anybody can come.
Yes, anybody's welcome to come. I'm moderating with another professor from St. Francis, Lori Woods. We're moderating, and like I said, we have some. It's sponsored by the American Association of University Women.
Okay.
Trying to reach out and
All
get
right.
the issues to the forefront.
Some of those issues include, Sherene, what? What are we talking specifically about?
Well, we're going to have the director from the Center for Population Studies, so talking about public health in the context of women. We're also going to have an ethnologist, and don't ask me exactly what that is, but you know they have a lot to do with the different sort of demographics related to women. We're going to have someone from a women's shelter speaking from Johnstown, and a local physician here, Dr. Amanda Vallia.
Okay.
So we've got definitely many perspectives there, and it should be a very good panel.
Yeah, women's health issues. Again, that is tomorrow, 5:30.
Tomorrow, 5:30 to 7:30. There are refreshments at 4:30 if anybody cares to come and network a little bit beforehand.
And that's at Breesedale.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, and thank you both for coming in to visit with us.
Thank you for
today.
having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It is Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. It's WCCS, AM 1160 and FM 101.1.